On a crisp December afternoon in 1974, three young girls set out on a mundane Christmas shopping trip in Fort Worth, Texas. Little did they know that this ordinary excursion would become one of America's most baffling mysteries. Hi folks, I'm Johnny and welcome to The Oddest. So, Rachel Trelisa, 17 years old, Lisa Renee Wilson, 14, and Julianne Mosley, only 9, vanished without a trace from the Seminary South shopping centre, leaving behind only a locked car and a web of unanswered questions. Their disappearance on that fateful day would haunt their families, baffle law enforcement, and captivate the public for decades to come. Mary Rachel Trelisa was a 17-year-old high school student at Southwest High School in Fort Worth, Texas. Rachel had been married for about 6 months to her husband Tommy Trelisa. She owned a 1972 Oldsmobile 98, which was the vehicle that she would be driving on the day the girls disappeared. Lisa Renee Wilson was 14 years old and she and Rachel had been friends for a fair wee while, and their respective families, well, they were pretty close as well. At the time of the girls' disappearance, Renee had a boyfriend called Terry, who had just given her a promise ring as an early Christmas gift. Then there was Julianne Mosley, 9 years old. She lived across the street from Renee's grandmother, and she was the younger sister of Renee's boyfriend. So, on December 23rd of 1974, Rachel and Renee had made plans to try and squeeze in some last-minute Christmas shopping. Young Julie, feeling bored and not wanting to be all by herself, well, she asked if she could join the pair on their trip. The older girls told her, well, that would be fine, but she would have to seek permission first. So, Julie then called up her mom, Rianne, who was a bit unsure about letting her go. Julie didn't have any money after all, and while Rianne knew Rachel, she wasn't as familiar with Renee. Anyway, after some hesitation, Rianne eventually agreed, realising that Julie would only just feel lonely and maybe get under her feet if she stayed behind. The three girls headed out, aiming to be back by 4 PM that same day. Renee was especially eager to return on time since she had a Christmas party with her boyfriend later that night and she needed time to get ready. The girls' first stop was a surplus store in Fort Worth, where Renee had some things on layaway that she wanted to collect. Once they were done there, they then made their way to the Seminary South shopping centre, which was also in Fort Worth, completely unaware that this routine shopping trip was about to alter their lives forever.
If you've been in Fort Worth for a long time, you know about this case.
And the day I spoke to Rusty Arnold, it should have been a celebration.
Today is Rachel's birthday.
But there's been no celebration since 1974, when his sister, Rachel Trelisa, her friend Renee Wilson, and 9-year-old Julianne Mosley went shopping at the Seminary South Shopping Center. Their car was found, but they haven't been seen since.
The family's had missing persons posters printed up and a reward fund established.
There's something's happened to him. I know it.
When the girls didn't come back as expected, their families grew worried and decided to check things out for themselves. They then drove to the Seminary South shopping centre, and it didn't take long for them to spot Rachel's car parked on the upper level of the Sears parking lot. But the girls, they were nowhere in sight. There have been some mistaken reports claiming that the car was filled with shopping bags, but in reality, there were no bags from the mall. The only things inside the car were the layaway items that Renee had collected earlier, and a wrapped up gift that she brought along for Rachel's stepson. The families stayed at the mall throughout the night, hoping that the girls would simply return, but they never did. Like many missing persons cases involving young people, the police just first assumed that the girls had simply run away, but their families, well, they didn't buy into that idea at all. They pointed out that Renee had been super excited about the Christmas party that she was planning to attend that night, and it seemed unthinkable that 9-year-old Julie would want to run off right before Christmas. Several eyewitnesses confirmed seeing Rachel, Renee and young Julie at the mall on the day they disappeared. Some even reported spotting the girls with a security guard, or getting into a vehicle marked with the words security on the side. Most descriptions indicated that the girls seemed relaxed and in good spirits. One woman told the store clerks that she saw the three girls in a pickup truck with a man, but unfortunately she didn't leave her name and she's never come forward to assist the police in the investigation. Another eyewitness reported seeing something more alarming, claiming that the girls were being forced into a pickup truck by two men. 2 days after the girls disappeared, Tommy Trelisa, Rachel's husband, well, he received a strange and troubling letter that was ostensibly from his wife.
I know I'm going to catch it, but we had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in the Sears upper lot. Love, Rachel.
Strangely though, the letter was addressed to Thomas Trelisa, even though he went by Tommy, which is what Rachel always called him. On top of that, Rachel's parents were certain that the handwriting, well, it didn't match hers.
The next day, the only major lead in the case developed when a handwritten note was received.
A note supposedly written by Rachel said the girls needed to get away and went to Houston, but for the families, it just didn't fit.
I don't think my sister wrote that note.
Copies of that note, the envelope, and everything else now sit in this room waiting for an answer.
Another strange detail was that the author seemed to have initially misspelled Rachel, writing it with a second E, before correcting it by tracing over it with an I. It seemed highly unlikely that Rachel, who had written her name thousands of times, would make such an error. The letter was examined by many handwriting experts over the years, but with inconclusive results. Rachel, Renee and Julie have neither been seen nor heard from since. The families continued to search for the young girls in the years and decades following their disappearance, distributing missing persons flyers and hiring private investigators. One such private investigator, called Dan James, well, he reported that while interviewing friends of the missing girls, along with 2 individuals who had been living in the RV in Tommy and Rachel's backyard, well, he discovered that Rachel, Tommy and Deborah, now Deborah is Rachel's older sister and their roommate, well, they had been involved in some form of arguments in the weeks leading up to their disappearance. So here's some context though as to why this information is significant. See, Deborah was Tommy's ex-fiancée. After their breakup, Tommy started dating Rachel and then obviously got eventually married to her. In December of 1974, all 3 of them were living together. While this might seem like a tense and emotional arrangement from the outside, Deborah insisted that there was no bad blood between her and her sister, nor between her and Tommy. Dan James also reportedly found out that there had been a physical confrontation involving Rachel, Deborah and Tommy at a bowling alley just the day before the girls all vanished. The details surrounding this fight, including what sparked it or whoever was involved, well, that remains unclear. Deborah maintained that they had simply played canasta together the night before and they didn't mention any form of altercation. Additionally, Dan James suspected that Tommy and Deborah were actually having an affair and noted that some of Rachel's friends claimed that she was involved in multiple affairs also. Another individual that James identified as a potential person of interest was Rachel's father. He was called Raymond Cotton Arnold. He was reportedly physically abusive towards both of his daughters, which was said to be the primary reason that they chose to move out of the family home in the first place. Dan James then went on to state that in his investigation he had turned up evidence that Arnold himself was inappropriately involved with a number of underage girls and that he was possibly even inappropriate towards his own daughters. This brings us to a deeply unsettling theory proposed by the investigator Dan James. See, he suggested that Rachel might have been 6 to 8 weeks pregnant, with Arnold possibly being the father. James pointed to medical records that allegedly confirmed her pregnancy, but again, these documents were never made public. There doesn't seem to be any substantial evidence backing up this theory at all. It largely appears to be the speculation of this private investigator. Cotton Arnold, who was suffering from stage 4 cancer when his daughter disappeared, well, he passed away just 4 months later. Rusty Arnold, Rachel's younger brother, initially suspected that Deborah might have had a role in her disappearance based on what this investigator had told him. However, he has since revised this perspective and is now focused on actively searching for clues about his sister's fate. Tommy Trelisa briefly offered a $2,000 reward for information leading to the whereabouts of his young wife, but he withdrew this reward within a year and then he ended up moving away. Both Tommy and Deborah have professed their innocence of any wrongdoing in this case. In 1975, a new suspect emerged, a 28-year-old man who had a weak connection to Rachel. Just before her disappearance, Rachel had applied for a job at a store in Fort Worth. The owner of that store, who is now considered a suspect, well, he reportedly made strange and harassing phone calls to the other 6 women who applied for the very same job. It remains unclear if Rachel ever received any of these phone calls, and ultimately, this it didn't lead to any other significant developments. In a strange turn of events though, another private investigator called John Swaim instructed that all his files related to the Fort Worth trio case be destroyed upon his death. And not long after that, in 1979, he did actually die from a drug overdose, which was classified as a suicide. Swaim had been involved in an investigation from the very beginning and was believed to have made significant progress in the case. Unfortunately, any findings that he may have uncovered in the last months, well, they were all lost along with him. Then, 27 years later, so in January of 2001, the case was reopened, leading police to interview over 20 new witnesses who had seen the girls that day in the mall. As a result of these interviews, they managed to narrow down their list of suspects to just 5 individuals. That same year, a former Fort Worth police officer and security guard at the Seminary South Sears store came forward, and he shared that he had seen these 3 girls with a young male security guard inside a pickup truck on December 23rd of 1974. He noted that they seemed completely relaxed and were even all laughing together. Authorities suspect that the girls left the mall with someone that they actually knew that day, and that's when things took a turn for the worse. In 2018, Rusty Arnold, still resolute in his quest for answers about his sister's fate, discovered that 3 cars had been found at the bottom of Benbrook Lake, just 8 miles from the shopping centre. He rallied a team of divers and numerous volunteers to retrieve all 3 vehicles, hoping to uncover any evidence related to the disappearance of the Fort Worth trio.
2 of our divers got hurt. We're looking for the missing trio. They disappeared in 1974. The oldest was Rachel, my sister, and I vowed I'd never stop looking for her, and I'm not. We found the 3rd car today, and we're going to see if there's anything in that car. We couldn't pull it out, but we can search it.
Sadly, they found nothing significant, nor any clues that might link the cars to this case. Rusty also became the administrator for the Missing Fort Worth Trio Facebook page, which at the time of writing has over 13,000 members. There were no significant updates until 2022, when another notable case in Fort Worth was then solved. Melissa Highsmith, who had been kidnapped as a child back in 1971, was finally reunited with her family, providing a heartwarming resolution to one of the nation's longest-running missing persons cases. It was then that Rusty Arnold began to consider the proximity between Highsmith's case and his sister's disappearance, pondering whether there might be some sort of connection. That same year, he revealed that an anonymous donor had offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could lead to an arrest or a conviction. The case is still open and active to this day, and the remaining family members continue to hold out hope that they will one day find definitive answers about what happened to Rachel Trelisa, Renee Wilson and young Julianne Mosley, and why they vanished 5 decades ago. As the years stretch into decades, the disappearance of Rachel, Renee and Julie continues to cast a long shadow over Fort Worth and beyond. Their story is not just a mystery that has captivated the public's imagination, but it's a stark reminder of a profound impact one single moment can have on countless lives. Thank you ever so much for watching this video, folks. I genuinely appreciate each and every one of you. If you're still here at this point, then please say hello in the comments, as I love to meet my viewers. Please stay safe out there, tell someone that you love them, and remember, above all else, keep smiling.